I was at work when I got the first sign. My phone buzzed with just a single notification, but it wasn't the message itself that caught my attention. It was the name, unknown number. At first I thought it was spam, some random scam text trying to get me to click on a link. But when I opened it, my stomach turned. You deserve to know. She's not who you think she is. Go to Sunset Motel, room 214 now. I stared at it for a long time, my heartbeat a slow, heavy drum in my chest. My first instinct was to ignore it. A sick joke, maybe, or even a mistake. But something about it made my hands shake, the kind of shake that comes when your body knows something before your mind does. I told myself I wouldn't go. I wasn't that guy, the jealous, paranoid husband who sneaks around spying on his wife. I refused to be. But an hour later, I was in my car. I had no plan, no real expectation of what I'd find. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was being an idiot. Maybe I'd go home and laugh about this later. But when I pulled into the parking lot of the Sunset Motel, I already knew there'd be no laughing. The place was a dump, the kind of motel where people went to disappear, not stay the night. The faded neon sign flickered. Paint peeled off the walls. Cigarette butts were crushed into the concrete. I could feel the weight of the air, thick, stale, wrong. I almost turned back, almost convinced myself I was losing my mind, but my feet kept moving. Room 214. The hallway smelled like mildew and bad decisions. I stopped in front of the door, hesitating. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I wasn't even sure what I was hoping for anymore. Then, before I could knock, the door opened, and I came face to face with Emma. Her hair was a mess. She was wearing a hoodie I'd never seen before. Her eyes went wide, and her breath caught in her throat like she'd seen a ghost. A man's voice called from inside. "Hey babe, you forgot your silence." And in that silence, everything imploded. She froze. I froze. For a second, the world stood still, hanging in some sick limbo where my brain refused to process what my eyes were screaming at me. Then, like a hammer to glass, reality slammed down. Emma's lips parted. Nothing came out. 1,000 expressions flickered across her face in seconds: shock, panic, guilt, something else I couldn't name. But not once did she look relieved to see me. Then, before I could even breathe, she did something I never expected. She shoved me hard. Not a push to move me aside, not a defensive reaction, an outright shove, as if her only thought was to get me away. What the hell? I started, stumbling back a step, but she was already moving. She grabbed the door, trying to slam it in my face. I caught it for a second. It was a battle, her weight against mine, her fingers gripping the edge, nails digging into the wood. She wasn't trying to explain. She wasn't trying to lie her way out of it. She was just desperate to shut me out. Move! I gritted out, my chest tight, my blood roaring in my ears. Leave, Liam, she snapped, voice low, vicious, like I was the problem here. You don't want to do this, I said. I don't want to do this. A bitter, wild laugh clawed its way up my throat. Are you seriously telling me to leave? Out of my way, Emma, I said. No. And that one word was cold, firm, final. That's when the last thread inside me snapped. I shoved the door harder, my body surging forward, forcing my way in. And then I saw him, the man standing by the bed, shirtless, holding a pair of jeans like he'd been in the middle of pulling them on. He was young. Too young. Mid-20s, maybe. Gym-built body, expensive watch, that cocky frozen expression of a man who just realized he messed with the wrong person's life. His mouth opened, some excuse already forming. I didn't want to hear it. Everything in me screamed to hit him, to grab him by his pretty boy throat and make him feel even a fraction of what was currently tearing through my chest. But then Emma did the one thing I never expected. She laughed. Short, sharp, almost amused. You really followed me? She said, shaking her head like I was a pathetic joke. Wow. That's embarrassing. And just like that, I forgot all about him. All the fury, the heartbreak, the absolute shattering of my world, It all turned to something else, something colder. I met her eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw her clearly. As I stared at her, my hands clenched so tightly at my sides that I could feel my nails cutting into my palms. Emma, my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, stood in front of me, laughing like this was some sick joke. Like I was the punchline. The guy behind her shifted uncomfortably, like he wanted to disappear. Smart. If he had any sense at all, he'd keep his mouth shut and stay the hell out of this. But Emma? She wasn't done. No big speech. She taunted, tilting her head, her arms crossed like I was wasting her time. No dramatic. "How could you do this to me?" moment. She smirked. "Come on, Liam. You came all this way. Give me something." A cold, visceral rage settled in my stomach. It wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was the way she was looking at me, like I was beneath her, like I was some idiot who should have stayed blind. "You don't even care, do you?" My voice was eerily calm, but inside, I was burning. She rolled her eyes. "Of course I care. I just don't feel like pretending I don't." The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. She sighed dramatically. "Fine. You want honesty? Here it is. I was bored, Liam. You and your little perfect husband routine, it got boring." She shrugged like she was talking about a bad TV show. "And well, turns out I don't actually need you." Surprise. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "You could have just left." She snorted. "And what? Miss out on all the fun?" The guy behind her took a step forward like he was about to speak, but I lifted a hand, stopping him without even looking at him. He must have sensed the storm in me, because he froze. Smart. Emma sighed again, rubbing her temple like this was exhausting for her. "Listen, Liam," she said. "I could give you some long-winded excuse, but we both know you're not stupid. Yeah, I cheated. Yeah, you found out? Congrats. Now what?" She gestured around the motel room. "You want to fight him? You want to cry? You want to drag me home and beg me to be better?" Her voice dropped, and her lips curled into something cruel. "Or are you finally going to accept that you never mattered as much as you thought you did?" Silence. Thick, suffocating. Then, something inside me snapped, not with violence, not with anger, but with clarity. I let out a breath and smiled, for the first time since stepping into this nightmare. I smiled. And Emma's smirk faltered, just a little, just for a second. But I saw it. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't in control of this situation anymore. I was. Emma's confidence wavered for less than a second, but I caught it. That tiny flicker of uncertainty. That split second where her smirk cracked, and she realized I wasn't reacting the way she wanted. She expected rage. She wanted me to explode, to yell, to beg, to throw a punch. She wanted me to break. Instead, I stood there, calm. Too calm. She didn't like it. "What's so funny?" she snapped, her arms still crossed, but I could see the shift, a flicker of nerves. Neath all that arrogance, I exhaled, shaking my head. "You," I said simply. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" I took a slow step forward. She didn't move back, but I saw the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers twitched. "You really thought you had me, huh?" I murmured. "That I'd fall apart over this? That I'd be too weak to handle the truth?" She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh please, Liam. Don't act like you're some kind of... I'm done." The words cut through her sentence like a blade. Her mouth snapped shut, and just like that, the power shifted. She wasn't in control anymore. I was. I took another step forward, lowering my voice. "You want me to scream, cry, beg you to stay?" I leaned in just slightly, watching her flinch. "Not happening." I turned my head, finally acknowledging the guy in the room. He was frozen, still holding his jeans like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "You should go," I told him. He hesitated. I cut him off with a look. "I'm not going to hit you." I don't care enough to, I said. But if you have any self-respect, you'll leave before she finds a reason to make you the bad guy too. His eyes darted to Emma, like he was realizing for the first time that maybe he wasn't special either. That maybe he was just another toy to her. And then he left, didn't even finish putting his jeans on. He just grabbed his stuff and bolted, like the motel walls were on fire. And then it was just me and her. Emma clenched her jaw, arms still crossed tight. You're pathetic, she spat. I chuckled. Chuckled? Am I? She took a sharp breath, clearly trying to find her footing again. You can't just stand there and act like you don't care. I know you. You're hurt. You're dying inside. You'll be calling me in a week, saying you miss me. I met her gaze, held it, let her see the truth in my eyes. You don't know me at all. And with that, I turned around and walked out. I didn't look back. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I drove. I didn't know where I was going, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care. The road stretched ahead of me, the city lights smearing across my windshield, my mind a mess of static and adrenaline. I should have felt shattered. I should have been drowning in heartbreak, betrayal, something. But all I felt was this strange, exhilarating weightlessness, like I'd been carrying a dead body on my back for years and hadn't even realized it. Emma was gone, not physically, not legally, not yet, but in every way that mattered, she was nothing to me now. I pulled into a gas station, needing air, needing to breathe. The second I parked, my phone buzzed, Emma. I stared at the screen, the name that had once meant everything to me, that used to make my heart race with something good. Now it was just another nuisance. I let it ring. Then, 2 minutes later, a text. Talk to me. I laughed. Talk to me, as if she hadn't just torched 6 years of our lives like it was nothing. The phone buzzed again. I know you're mad, but we need to be adults about this. Come home so we can talk. Adults now? She wanted to act like we were mature, reasonable people now that she'd been caught. I locked my phone, but before I could even put it down, it rang again. This time, not Emma, Jessica, her best friend. I frowned, hesitating before answering. Hello? Liam? Jessica's voice was sharp, urgent. Where are you? I blinked. What? Where are you? She repeated, a little out of breath. Are you home? No. I stopped. Why? There was a pause, then she sighed, muttering something under her breath before saying, You need to get to the hospital. The words didn't make sense. What? It's Emma. Jessica's voice was tight, clipped. She was found at a motel, in a dreadful state. The cops were called. The world tilted. I just saw her. I know. Another sharp exhale. Liam, just get there. I didn't even hang up properly before I was back in the car, slamming my foot against the gas pedal. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel. And the whole way there, one thought kept ripping through my brain. What the hell did she do now? The hospital was a blur of bright lights and the sterile sting of antiseptic. My pulse hammered in my ears as I pushed through the doors, scanning the waiting room until I spotted Jessica pacing near the reception desk. She looked up the second she saw me, relief flashing across her face, but it was buried under something else, something serious. What the hell is going on? I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. Jessica didn't waste time. She was found unconscious in the motel parking lot. I froze. What? She must have left after you did. She rushed on, eyes darting around like she was making sure no one else was listening. The cops were already called by the time she was found. No one knows exactly what happened yet, but... She hesitated. They think she might have taken something. The air left my lungs in a brutal exhale. Drugs? I asked, my voice low. Jessica shook her head. No. Pills. Too many of them. I stared at her, my brain refusing to catch up. Emma doing this? The same woman who had laughed in my face just an hour ago. It didn't make sense. Is she? I swallowed. Is she okay? She's alive, Jessica said, but she was in bad shape when they found her. She's awake now. They're letting visitors in. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My whole body locked up. My mind at war. I had just left that motel. Just walked away from her. And now, she was here, in a hospital bed, as if the universe had decided to flip the entire script on me. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to care. But somehow, minutes later, I found myself standing at the threshold of her hospital room, frozen in place as I stared at the woman lying in that bed. She looked small. Not weak. Not fragile. Just smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her face was pale, her lips dry, her hair a mess around her face. But when she turned her head and saw me, her expression shifted in an instant. Not regret, not relief, not even sadness. Smugness. My stomach dropped. She gave me a slow, lazy smile, her voice hoarse but mocking. "Well, H," she whispered, her eyes glinting. "That got your attention, didn't it?" And just like that, every ounce of concern I had left for her evaporated. I stood in the doorway, gripping the frame so hard my fingers ached. My pulse was a steady, dangerous thrum in my ears. Every rational part of me had expected some kind of regret, maybe even a pathetic attempt at an apology. But this smug, calculated act? Emma had always been a piece of work, but this was something else entirely. I took a slow step into the room. She watched me with lazy amusement, her head tilted slightly. That damn smirk still playing at her lips. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside her, a cruel reminder that she was alive and well enough to be a manipulative disaster, even now. "You're out of your mind," I said, my voice quiet, dangerously steady. Her smile widened, like I'd given her a compliment. "Took you this long to figure that out?" Jessica had followed me into the room, arms crossed tightly, watching Emma with something between disbelief and exhaustion. She said sharply, "You almost died." Emma shrugged, actually shrugged. "Almost," she said. "Not quite." Jessica inhaled sharply, clearly holding back a storm of emotions. I had nothing left to hold back. I stepped closer to the bed, looking down at Emma, my jaw tight. "What the hell is this?" I asked, gesturing at her. "You think this is some kind of game?" Her eyes flickered just for a second, but then she leaned back against the pillows, exhaling dramatically. "Oh, relax. It wasn't that serious." I let out a breath, a slow, controlled breath, because if I didn't, I wasn't going to stay controlled. "You took pills in a motel parking lot," I said, "on the same damn night I caught you cheating on me. And now you're here acting like it was some kind of performance?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Liam. I wasn't trying to." She stopped, her lips twitching like she was choosing her words carefully. "Hurt myself. I just needed to clear my head. Took a little too much, that's all." Jessica made a sound, a mix of disbelief and barely restrained anger. I, on the other hand, laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous, so beyond comprehension that my body didn't know how else to react. Emma frowned. "What?" I shook my head, still laughing. "You really thought this would make me come running back, didn't you?" Her lips parted, eyes flashing with something I almost didn't recognize, surprise. For once, she hadn't expected my reaction. And that was when I knew. She had banked on me breaking. On me feeling responsible. On me scooping her up, bringing her home, fixing her. But that wasn't going to happen. Not anymore. "You're sick," I said, shaking my head. "You are actually sick." Her expression darkened, her amusement slipping. "Oh, don't be dramatic." I cut her off. No, you don't get to sit there and act like this is normal, like this is just another one of your little manipulations. You don't get to pull this, Emma. Not this time." She scoffed. "Oh, get over yourself, Liam. If I wanted you back, I could have you." I smiled a slow, cold smile. "No," I said simply. "You couldn't. For the first time in our entire toxic, miserable relationship, I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before: panic. Just a flicker. Just a second. But I saw it. And I turned my back on her before she could try to hide it. Then I walked out. Didn't look back. Didn't hesitate. Just turned and left Emma lying in that hospital bed, stewing in the consequences of her own actions. Jessica followed me out into the hallway, her heels clicking against the floor. She didn't say anything at first, just walked beside me, her arms still crossed, tension radiating off her in waves. Then, finally, she exhaled sharply. "That was insane." I let out a dry laugh. "Which part?" "All of it," she said, running a hand through her hair, shaking her head. "I mean, I knew she was self-centered, but this? This was something else." "Yeah," I muttered, still feeling the weight of it. We reached the waiting area, and I stopped, rubbing a hand over my face. The adrenaline crash was hitting me now, the anger, the disbelief, the sheer exhaustion of everything I'd been through in the last few hours. Jessica hesitated, then said, "Listen, I know this isn't the time, but you need to be smart about this, Liam." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice. "Emma's not done." I stared at her. Jessica sighed. "You saw how she was in there. She's not scared. She's not sorry. She's planning something." A chill crawled down my spine, because as much as I hated to admit it, Jessica was right. Emma was too calm, too smug, like she still thought she had control. And that meant this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I exhaled. "I need to get home." Jessica nodded. "You good to drive?" I paused, then gave her a look. "Why do you even care?" Jessica snorted. "Because as much as I hate Emma right now, I hate the idea of her somehow winning even more." "Fair enough," I said. We left it at that. I stepped out into the cool night air, inhaling deeply, trying to shake off the weight of the hospital, of Emma, of everything. But the second I unlocked my car and slid inside, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I stiffened. Slowly, I picked up my phone, my pulse ticking up as I opened the message. "You think you're free? You're not. Watch your back." My blood went cold, because this wasn't Emma. And now I had no idea what the hell I was dealing with. I sat there, staring at the screen, my grip tightening around the phone. "Watch your back." The word sat there, glowing in the dark like a warning from something lurking in the shadows, something unseen. But this wasn't Emma. That was the part that made my skin crawl. Emma was a disaster, a liar, a manipulative train wreck, but she wasn't subtle. She wouldn't send a cryptic text like this. She'd throw it in my face. She'd call me directly just to hear my reaction. So if it wasn't her, then who the hell was it? I scanned the parking lot on instinct, every hair on my body standing on end. No one. Just empty cars, flickering streetlights, the distant hum of traffic. I exhaled slowly, forcing my heartbeat to slow the hell down. This was either a bluff, some final desperate attempt to rattle me, or it was something worse. I didn't wait to find out. I started my car and pulled out of the parking lot, gripping the wheel tighter than I should have been. My brain was running in 1,000 directions at once, trying to piece it together, trying to make it make sense. And then my phone rang. I flinched, nearly swerving before glancing down at the screen. Emma. I clenched my jaw, my foot pressing just a little harder on the gas. I let it ring, then a voicemail. I debated ignoring it, letting it sit there, unread, unheard, like the rest of her worthless apologies and manipulations. But something in my gut told me to listen, so I did. The message played, and the second I heard her voice, I knew something was off. She was crying. Not fake crying, not the dramatized, guilt-tripping sobs she'd used on me before. This was different, panicked. "Liam," she choked out. I don't know what's happening. Someone's been watching me, calling me. I thought it was you, but it's not. I think I made a mistake. Her breath hitched. "I need to talk to you. Please call me back." The voicemail ended, and for the first time all night, I felt something I hadn't expected: fear. Not for Emma. For myself. Because whatever game she had been playing, she wasn't the one running it anymore. I didn't call her back. Not right away. I sat there, parked outside my apartment, the engine still running, Emma's voicemail repeating in my head. The panic in her voice. The way she said, "I think I made a mistake." For the first time since this nightmare started, she sounded genuinely afraid. And that terrified me. Because Emma wasn't the type to admit fear. She wasn't the type to feel fear. She manipulated, controlled, twisted people until she was the one pulling all the strings. But now, someone else was pulling hers. I shut off the car and got out, my body tense, the night air. The air felt thicker, heavier, like something unseen was sitting in it, watching. I checked over my shoulder twice before heading up to my apartment, locking the door behind me. I stood there in the silence, debating, call her back or ignore her? Every instinct screamed to let her deal with her own mess, but the problem was, I wasn't sure whose mess this was anymore. And that text, "You think you're free? You're not. Watch your back." It hadn't come from Emma. But if she was getting the same kind of messages, if she thought I was the one sending them, then who else was involved? I ran a hand down my face, exhaling sharply. Screw it. I called her back. She picked up immediately. "Liam." Her voice was hoarse, frantic. "Oh my God, thank God Who's watching you?" I cut in, no small talk, no sympathy. I just needed the truth. She swallowed hard. I don't know. I started getting messages right after you left the motel. I thought it was you messing with me. I thought you were trying to scare me. I almost laughed at the irony. Not everything is about you, Emma. Her breath shuddered on the other end. I know that now. Silence stretched between us. Then she whispered, "Liam, I think I messed with the wrong person." My blood went ice cold. What the hell does that mean? There was a deep, shuddering inhale on her end. I don't think the guy from the motel was the only one. The world tilted. Everything snapped into focus all at once. I had spent the entire night thinking I was dealing with the same Emma I'd always known, the liar, the manipulator, the one who played games. But now I realized something worse. Emma wasn't playing a game anymore. She was running for her life. And somehow, so was I.